They left her hanging between two trees until the cowboy rode in and said, "Touch her again and die." And that's how the whole town of Clearbrook got flipped on its head. It was Colorado territory 18 years after something, but who cares about the date? The wind shrieked like a dying thing, tearing dust across a flat, sun-blistered nightmare of a land. Between two dead cypress trees, their bark long stripped away, a woman dangled. This wasn't some outlaw. This was Hattie Bellamy, the judge's widow. She was strung up with thick ropes tight around her wrists, arms stretched wide, her feet inches from the cracked, thirsty earth. Her dress, shredded, her face, bruised and swollen. She looked like a surrendered flag. Dozens of people stood watching. Miners, gun belts, women with patched shawls. But they hadn't come for justice, oh no. They came for the spectacle. She thought she could mess with power, someone muttered. She stole court files, another spat. No, a third corrected, she found something she shouldn't have. This is a lesson for wives. The man holding the coiled end of the rope wore a star on his chest. Elijah Blake, the deputy marshal, tall, sun-cracked, eyes like flint. He had shared meals at Hattie's table. He had called her husband brother. Now he stood with his boot on a pulley rig, the mechanism straining, ready to snap her shoulders. "Let it be known Hattie Bellamy is not above the law," Elijah yelled to the gawking crowd. "She stole evidence and refused to speak the name she uncovered." Hattie's voice was barely a rasp against the wind. "I never ran. I followed the truth. I know what happened to Charles." Elijah's jaw locked down hard. "You will not slander the dead." And then he gave the signal. A man on horseback pulled the rope taut. Hattie gasped, her back arching, the cords burning into her skin. The crowd leaned in. This was it. But then, crack. Not thunder, gunfire. One of the pulley ropes snapped, torn clean through by a perfect, impossible bullet. Hattie dropped like a stone, collapsing limp and unconscious into the swirling sand. And that's when he rode in. A horse stepped out from the tree line, a shadow cut from stone. The rider was still, calm as the chaos froze. He wore a weathered duster, his hat pulled low, his face obscured. A Winchester rifle rested in its sling. His boots were stained with travel. His stare was pure, cold steel. He dismounted without haste, boots crunching the gravel. The dust seemed to part for him. "Touch her again," he said, voice low and deliberate. The crowd breathed the rest of the sentence. "And die." Elijah narrowed his eyes. "This is not your business, stranger." The cowboy's eyes didn't even flinch. He moved toward Hattie's body, stooping to lift her into his arms. "No law gives you the right to interfere," Elijah growled. The man finally met his gaze. "Law died the moment you used rope on a woman too weak to lift her own arms." Someone started to raise a rifle, then lowered it, suddenly realizing the danger. No one moved. No one dared. The cowboy adjusted Hattie in his arms, swung her up onto the saddle, climbed up behind her and nudged the reins. He never looked back. The last thing they saw was the edge of his coat disappearing into the red, whipping wind. Up in the stone hearth of a small mountain cabin, a fire popped gently. Outside, the wind moaned through the Colorado foothills, but inside, the air was still and warm with steam. Sawyer Grady, the cowboy, crouched by the stove, ladling broth into a tin bowl. His coat was drying by the fire, his sleeves were rolled up, showing scarred forearms. He didn't look at the woman on the cot, just dipped a cloth into a basin and wrung it out with quiet precision. He laid the damp cloth across Hattie's forehead. She stirred, her breath hitched, eyes blinking against the low firelight. She tried to sit up, but her arms trembled. "Where am I? Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse and cracked. Sawyer placed the bowl on the table beside her, sat on the floor with his back against the wall, and stared at the flames for a long time. "I watched my sister hang," he said finally, not answering her question at all. "A girl with soft hands, said she stole bread. Town didn't need proof, just someone to blame." Hattie stared, chest heaving, unsure if this was the cabin or still the nightmare. "You didn't touch me," she said slowly, realizing it out loud. "No need to," he said. "You were bleeding. I bandaged. That's all." She looked down. Her arms were wrapped in clean cloth. He stood, poured water into a tin mug, and set it on the table. "Drink. You've got a fever." She reached out, hands still trembling, and took the cup. The first sip burned, but it grounded her. "You took me from them," she said. He nodded once. "You were half dead." "Why?" she asked. He didn't answer. He turned to stir the soup again, as if that question wasn't part of the deal. The silence settled between them, thick and heavy. She watched him, trying to piece together the man who had appeared from nowhere and saved her without a single reason. She put down the cup. "They think I stole something." Sawyer gave no sign of listening, but he didn't leave either. "My husband, Charles Bellamy, he was a circuit judge. He tried to stay clean. That's why they hated him." Still no reply. 3 weeks before he died, he stopped sleeping. I found him pacing. He told me he had a book, a record, names of men on the take, from whiskey to land fraud. He said if something happened to him, I'd know what to do. Now Sawyer looked up. "They said he fell from a horse," she swallowed hard, "but he never rode without a bridle, and he never rode drunk. I searched his desk the next day. The book was gone." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I asked questions. The wrong people noticed. Then someone claimed I stole classified files. The sheriff wrote a warrant before I could speak. I ran." Sawyer shifted slightly, remaining silent. "I was going to take the stagecoach to Denver. I had a contact there, a journalist, but they caught me first." He picked up the soup and handed it to her. "Eat." Hattie took the bowl, hesitated. "You still haven't told me who you are." He looked at her, eyes grey and unreadable. "Sawyer Grady, freight runner. Used to scout for the Union Army." She blinked. "And now you rescue strangers tied to trees." Sawyer refilled the cup without meeting her gaze. "Not strangers, just the ones no one else will. I owed my sister that much." Hattie looked down at her soup, hands cradling the bowl. She didn't thank him. He didn't ask for it. But something had definitely changed. The fire had burned low. Outside, the wind sighed through pine needles, brushing the rocky outcrop like whispers from the past. Hattie sat by the table, eyes distant. Sawyer sat across from her, rolling a cigarette, his face a shadow. The silence was heavy, thick with words neither had spoken. "I never wanted any of this," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "Charles, my husband, he was a good man, too good for that town." Sawyer lit the cigarette and let the smoke curl between his fingers. "He started hearing things," she continued, "stories about rail contracts, stolen land deeds, whiskey taxes disappearing, names he recognized, men he shook hands with at town meetings." Her fingers traced the edge of the tin cup. "One night I woke to find him in his study holding a pistol. He said, 'If I don't write it down, I'll be next.'" She looked up, eyes shimmering. "He kept a ledger, names, dates, amounts, crimes, a black book that could tear the town in half." Sawyer's brow twitched, still nothing. "He showed it to me once, said, 'If anything happens to me, you burn it or run.' I didn't run," she said bitterly, "not fast enough." She stood and walked to her satchel, pulling something wrapped in oilcloth from beneath a shawl. She placed it on the table. Slowly, carefully, she unwrapped the cloth to reveal a small black ledger. Leather worn, edges scuffed. It was the black book. "I found it the day after his funeral," she whispered, hidden behind a false panel in his desk. She opened it, flipping through the pages. Judge Ryland, Sheriff Amos, Mayor Lively, even Elijah Blake. Her voice broke. Charles wrote it all down. Bribes, threats, even names of victims who were made to disappear. She closed the book and hugged it to her chest. "I was going to take it to Denver, to the Gazette, but someone tipped them off. They said I stole federal files. They put my name on wanted posters, just like a horse thief." Sawyer rested his forearm on the table, studying her. "I ran from one county to another, hid in barns, slept in dried creek beds. Every time I tried to send a letter or board a train, someone was watching." She paused, then looked up. "I never expected them to drag me into the desert and hang me like a warning." She wiped her eyes. "I am not the brave one, Mr. Grady. I was scared every day." Sawyer poured leaves into paper with practiced hands. "You still have the book," he said, calm as stone. "That's braver than most." Hattie sat back down, fingers gripping the ledger's edge. "I should burn it," she whispered, "throw it in the fire and forget it ever existed." But you won't, he said simply. She looked at him. You didn't run when they tied you up, he explained. You didn't scream. That tells me you still think there's something worth fighting for. He struck a match. The flame flared, lit his cigarette, and was snuffed. He leaned forward. Kind of rare, he said. Someone wants the truth more than they want to live. She studied his quiet certainty. Finally, she asked, Then why did you save me? Sawyer didn't hesitate. Because I once stood by and watched them hang my sister, he said, his voice gravel and regret. She didn't cry either. He crushed the cigarette in the tin tray. I've been looking for someone who'd fight back since then, someone I could believe in. She blinked, unsure how to respond to that weight of history. He stood, nodding toward the ledger. Get some rest. We'll need a plan. She clutched the book tighter. Outside, the wind howled like judgment in the dark, but inside, between two battered souls and the truth bound in black leather, something steady had begun to burn. By dawn, the mountains wore a crown of fog. Sawyer knelt in the dirt near the cabin, his gloved fingers brushing across the faint print of a horseshoe. He stood slowly, scanning the tree line. They're close, he muttered. Rider alone, maybe 2 days behind. Not from around here. Hooves too narrow, eastern breed. Hattie appeared in the doorway, alarm in her eyes. They found us. Sawyer didn't answer. He turned back toward the cabin and began unpacking a coiled line of wire and some sharpened stakes. What are you doing? Setting a snare, he said. We may not have long. That afternoon, he handed her a revolver. Hattie blinked. I've never used one. You're going to learn, he said. He showed her the grip, how to check the cylinder, how to cock and aim. Keep your elbows loose. Let the kick work through your arms. Don't fight it. She lined up the sight and fired. The bullet went wide. By sunset, she was hitting a knot in a pine trunk from 30 feet. That night, they didn't sleep much. Hattie paced while Sawyer sat by the fire, sharpening a blade. Every snap of twigs outside made her flinch. I never wanted to carry a gun, she whispered. No one ever does, he replied, but this world doesn't wait for wants. In the early morning, they climbed a ridge overlooking the town below. The buildings looked like toys scattered on the earth. Hattie stood beside Sawyer, arms crossed tight against the wind. What if we don't go back? She asked. What if we stay here, ride further north, burn the book? Let them keep their lies. Sawyer's jaw tightened. You could do that, but you die a little every day. Different kind of death, slower, but just as real. I am tired, Sawyer, she whispered. I do not want to be brave anymore. He nodded. Then don't be brave, just be honest. Do what needs doing. The wind tugged her hair across her face. What about you? She asked. Sawyer's eyes stayed locked on the town. I never stopped fighting, he said, but I forgot what I was fighting for, until now. Hattie looked back at the town. Her breath came shallow. We go back, she said at last. Sawyer gave a short nod. Her hand slipped into his, fingers rough from days of healing. Together they turned toward the path back down the ridge, toward danger, toward justice, toward a truth that could kill them both. The red earth began to change as they neared the outskirts of the town. Shrubs gave way to sparse fence lines and the skeletal silhouettes of burned-out homesteads. Sawyer slowed his horse. His shoulders were tense. We're being watched, he murmured. Hattie, riding behind him, adjusted her scarf. How do you know? I just do. The first shot cracked through the silence. Sawyer's horse bucked and screamed. He swung around, shielding Hattie as they hit the ground. Dirt flew. Another shot rang out, splintering a tree trunk. 3 figures emerged from behind a low ridge, rifles raised. Elijah's men. There's the witch and the deserter, one yelled, raising his gun again. Sawyer drew and fired first, hitting the man square in the thigh. The attacker crumpled with a scream. The second man advanced fast. Sawyer aimed, but a pain exploded in his shoulder. He dropped to one knee, teeth gritted. Damn it, he groaned. Hattie knelt beside him, panic rising. You're hit. Gun in your saddlebag. She fumbled through the leather straps, found the revolver. The third man emerged from behind a boulder, rifle aimed directly at them. Hattie raised the revolver with shaking hands, sighted in, and fired. The bullet tore through his wrist. He dropped the weapon, howling. She gasped, stunned she had actually hit him. Time to move, Sawyer growled, blood soaking his shirt. With one arm useless, he still managed to pull her up. They half stumbled, half ran into the trees. Another shot missed them wildly. Eventually the shouts behind them faded. They collapsed near the mouth of a cave tucked into the hillside. Sawyer dropped to his knees, panting. "You're bleeding badly," Hattie whispered, her voice tight with fear. "I've seen worse," he muttered, but his face was grey. Inside the cave, she tore a strip from her underskirt and pressed it to the wound. He winced but didn't pull away. "Stay awake," she said, voice firmer now. "Talk to me." Sawyer managed a weak smile. "You shoot better than you think." "You scared the hell out of me," she snapped, tearing more fabric. "I thought you said we'd make it back." He chuckled dryly. "We still might. I was a scout once. Takes more than a bullet to the shoulder to knock me out." She stared at him, then reached for her bag. From a tin she'd packed, she pulled dried bark and leaves. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Making a poultice," she said. "You said earlier to boil pine bark and yarrow for infection." I listened. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. "You're a fast learner." "I've had to be." She boiled water over a tiny flame, mixed the herbs into a paste, and packed it into a cloth. Gently she pressed it to the wound. He hissed through his teeth. "Don't pass out," she said. "I need you awake." His breathing steadied. She leaned back, watching him carefully. After a long silence, Hattie whispered, "Back there, when you got hit, you still held on to me." He looked up at her, eyes dark and unreadable. "You did not have to," she said. "I did," he replied simply. "I would not have let go no matter what." She nodded slowly, her heart thudding. "I've never felt safe," she whispered. "Not since Charles died. Not with anyone. Not until now." His brow furrowed. "That ain't something I'm used to hearing." "Well," she said softly, placing her hand on his, "get used to it." He turned his hand slightly and closed his fingers over hers. Neither of them said anything more. Outside, the wind howled, sweeping away all evidence, but inside the cave, the fire glowed steady and warm. The town of Clearbrook was dead quiet by the time Hattie and Sawyer returned. They moved like shadows along the edges of night, staying close to the alleys and the dark corners where secrets love to hide. The moon hung low, watching them with a pale, silent eye. Hattie's breath came in shallow bursts, not from fear, but from the weight of what she hoped to find. The old law office stood unchanged, abandoned since Charles's death. No one dared step inside. Sawyer stopped at the edge of the stoop. "I'll keep watch." Hattie nodded, her fingers already finding the spare key beneath a loose stone. The lock clicked open. Inside, dust ruled. The air smelled like ink and time. Her own heartbeat echoed in the silence. Her eyes went straight to Charles's desk. She opened drawers methodically, left, right, center. Nothing but old pens and files. Then she felt it, a false bottom in the last drawer. She pried it gently. It lifted with a soft pop. Inside was a single letter, aged, creased, sealed with the wax mark of a judge's ring. She broke it open, her hands trembling. Her voice cracked as she read aloud to herself, "Hattie, if you found this, then I am likely gone. I tried to hold the line, but the line moved. The men I once dined with have turned wolves. They came to me with threats. Elijah among them, the mayor, the railroad men, the sheriff. They own the law, and I was foolish to think I could stand alone. But I trust you. You always asked why I kept secrets. It was never to keep you in the dark. It was to keep you safe. The ledger is real. And if it's in your hands now, then you're braver than I ever was. Tell the truth, no matter what they do. I love you, Charles." Her knees gave out. She sank slowly onto the edge of the desk, letter clutched in both hands. Her shoulders shook, not with tears, but with a rising, controlled fury. Sawyer stepped inside, silent. He saw the letter, her pale face. "What did he say?" he asked gently. Hattie didn't look up. She read it again aloud, voice flat but strong. Each word landed like iron. When she finished, she let the paper fall. Sawyer picked it up, scanning quickly, his jaw tightening. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew they'd come for him. He left it to me. And I ran." "You didn't run," Sawyer said, his voice low. "You survived." She looked at him. He didn't die for justice. He died because he believed I could finish what he started. And you will." She looked out the window toward the town square, dim under moonlight. "They hung me once," she said softly. "Let them hear my voice next." Sawyer nodded. "Then we give them the truth loud and clear." She took the letter back, folded it slowly, and this time her hands didn't tremble. The fight was on. By noon, the square in front of the old church was packed. Men leaned against fence posts. Women clutched children. Miners squinted into the sun. A makeshift platform stood at the center, 4 crates nailed together, creaking under the weight of an imminent reveal. Sawyer had built it that morning. He stood beside it now, silent, hands crossed behind his back. On the platform lay 3 items: a worn leather-bound book, a folded letter sealed in broken wax, and Sawyer's revolver. The black ledger, Charles Bellamy's final words, and the threat of justice. Hattie Bellamy stepped onto the platform, boots firm, eyes clear. The sun lit her from behind, giving her a halo. "I was hanged in the name of silence," she said, her voice ringing out. "Today I speak." The crowd shifted. A few murmured. One woman gasped, recognizing the figure who had nearly died days before. "I was accused of theft," Hattie continued, "of running from the law. But what I ran from was a lie. What I carried was the truth." She held up the letter. "This was written by my husband, Judge Charles Bellamy, before he died. He named names. He named fear. And he believed someone would finish what he started." She placed the letter down, then opened the ledger. "This book," she said, "contains transactions, illegal shipments, bribes, and the signatures of men who run this town, including its mayor." Gasps, louder now. From the back of the crowd, a voice barked, "Lies!" Mayor Thompson pushed forward, red-faced, trembling with fury. "This woman is delusional. There's no proof any of that's real. Anyone could have forged those pages." Sawyer didn't move. His eyes stayed on the shifting faces in the crowd. "Even her own husband knew she was unstable," the mayor went on, pointing. "She fled justice. She incited violence. She was nearly killed," Sawyer said evenly, "for knowing the truth." "And who the hell are you, Cowboy?" Thompson spat. Sawyer stepped forward, unhurried. "I'm the man who watched his sister hang for a crime she didn't commit. I don't let liars speak louder than the truth anymore." At that moment, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. Mary, the old housemaid who'd worked for the Bellamys. Her hands trembled as she climbed onto the platform. I have something to say." Everyone turned. Mary steadied herself, then looked straight at Hattie. "After Charles died," she said, her voice fragile but firm, "I saw Elijah Blake come into the judge's office. He took the black book, said it was evidence, but he burned half the pages. And he told me this never existed. I didn't speak because I was afraid. They said they'd run my son out of work. But I've seen what silence costs." The crowd rippled. Men cursed under their breath. Suddenly, a sharp click split the air. Elijah Blake stepped from behind a wagon, revolver drawn, pointed straight at Hattie. "Enough," he barked. "You'll smear my name with ghost stories and old ink." He cocked the hammer, but Sawyer had already moved. With one smooth motion, he drew his gun and fired, shooting the revolver clean from Elijah's hand. It clattered to the dirt. Sawyer didn't raise his voice. "The last time you pointed a gun at someone innocent, they nearly died. This time, you won't get the chance." Elijah dropped to his knees, cradling his scorched hand. Silence fell. Then from the crowd, a shout, "Hang him instead." "No," Hattie said calmly. "We are not them." She stepped forward. "Let the truth be its own rope." The people parted, unsure at first, then began to murmur agreement. Justice wasn't fire and rope that day. Justice was finally listening. And for once, the town of Clearbrook did. Elijah Blake was marched through the center of Clearbrook in shackles, head lowered. No crowd jeered. No one spat. They simply watched, quiet and firm, as the man who once upheld false law now faced the honest kind. Behind him, Mayor Thompson signed his resignation with a hand that trembled more from shame than age. Within the week, the Black Ledger had been sent to Denver. Names were exposed, accounts frozen, and distant men in suits began to sweat over signatures they never thought would surface. And in Clearbrook, they chose Hattie Bellamy to stand among them, not behind a man, not beside a scandal, but in front of justice. The town's first woman on the council, widow of a fallen judge and survivor of a rope meant to silence. The night they told her, she stood under the same two trees they had once strung her between. The bark still bore scars, but the wind was quieter now. The sand didn't sting so much. Sawyer came up beside her. "You did it," he said. "No," she replied, "we did." They never spoke of marriage, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined what came next. There were no rings, no contracts, just the way Hattie looked at him when the coffee boiled, or how Sawyer reached for her hand without needing to speak. He rebuilt the ranch by hand. The porch was swept, repaired, and layered with a rug embroidered with two horses side by side, a gift from the town, but it was the sign that made it theirs. He carved the letters at night, whittling each stroke slow and careful. The sign read, "Bellamy Grady Ranch." Underneath, in smaller print, "Where justice is not hung between two trees." The day he hung it on the archway, Hattie stood beside him, arms folded, eyes glassy. "You could have just written ranch," she teased. He shrugged. "Truth deserves a full name." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "It suits us." Days passed, slow, gentle. Chickens pecked the yard. Children from the town came by once a week for letters and reading, sitting on hay bales while Hattie read aloud. They called her Miss Bellamy, though some whispered Miss Judge, like it was a badge. One morning, Sawyer found something on the porch. A wrapped cloth bundle, still warm. Inside, a small loaf of bread, golden brown, shaped like a heart. A note was tucked beneath it in Hattie's handwriting. "This isn't to say thank you, it's to say I'm staying." He looked up. She was standing in the doorway, apron dusted with flour, a smile soft and waiting. He didn't speak. He just stepped inside, took her hand, and closed the door behind them. Outside, the sign creaked gently in the wind. The desert had its stories of rope and fire, of betrayal and silence. But here, under a Colorado sky, one story ended not in blood or exile, but in a name shared, a ranch rebuilt, and a woman who once hung between two trees, now walking free, head held high beside a man who never asked her to explain, only to stay. If that story gripped your heart like the Colorado wind, don't ride off just yet. We've got more tales of grit, redemption, and love blooming in the dust. So if you believe in justice that bites back, in cowboys who carry scars and keep promises, and in women who refuse to be silenced, hit that hype button and subscribe. We've got 100 more stories waiting at the edge of the horizon. Don't miss the next one.